Since I was young, I had always heard that there are two kinds of beings in this world, humans and demons. My mother often warned me to stay far away from the demon tribe. She said demons are inherently violent, with a love for eating human hearts. Every time she spoke of this, her eyes filled with fear, as if she had witnessed something terrible herself. But I always felt that things in this world couldn't be so easily divided into good and evil. That day, I had originally just gone to the foot of the mountain to gather some herbs. Who would have thought that, without realizing it, I had wandered too far and accidentally entered the depths of the mysterious forest where demons were said to roam. As the sky gradually darkened, the surrounding trees grew taller and more imposing, their branches intertwining above, letting only a few traces of light filter through. At that moment, I heard something strange. The sound of soft footsteps came from behind me, drawing closer and closer. My heart pounded furiously, and though I wanted to run, my legs were frozen in fear. Suddenly, a piercing, beastly roar echoed beside me. I spun around to see a pair of blood-red jaws lunging toward me. Just as it seemed there was no escape, a flash of silver light appeared. Before the beast could even graze the edge of my clothing, a powerful force slammed it to the ground. When I focused my gaze, I saw a figure standing in front of me. Under the moonlight, he wore white robes, his face so stunningly handsome he didn't seem human. But the most striking feature was the faint golden mark on his forehead, glowing softly in the night. It was the mark of the demon tribe. He turned to look at me, his gaze calm but with a trace of curiosity. "A human girl, why have you come to a place like this?" I stood there in shock, unable to speak. It was the first time in my life that I had been this close to a demon. But his eyes didn't carry the terror the legends spoke of. Instead, there was an inexplicable gentleness in them. I got lost, I whispered, my voice trembling uncontrollably. He chuckled softly. "This forest is dangerous for your kind. I'll take you out." And so, I followed him through the eerie depths of the woods. Along the way, I couldn't help but secretly glance at his back. His steps were light and graceful, as if he was walking on clouds, completely unlike the savage image the tales had painted of demons. "We've arrived," he suddenly stopped. "If you keep going forward, you'll see the human village." I wanted to say more, but he had already turned to leave. "Wait." I gathered the courage to call out. "Can you tell me your name?" He paused and glanced back at me. "Shenbai." "My name is Chinger," I blurted out. "Thank you for saving me." He nodded, and his figure quickly disappeared into the night. I stood there for a long time, unable to calm my racing heart. At that moment, I knew my life was about to change forever. Since that night, I couldn't help but think of those eyes, cold yet laced with gentleness. My curiosity about the demons grew stronger each day. For 7 consecutive days, I made excuses to go herb picking and ventured into the woods daily. Each time I reached the edge of the forest, I would hold my breath, hoping to see him again. But the figure in white never appeared. Turns out, demons really do like peace and quiet, I thought, though I couldn't resist stepping deeper into the forest. The spring breeze was warm, but in the woods, it carried a hint of coolness. I looked up at the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves and remembered how my mother had once told me that the dragon clan loved to roam in such pleasant weather. Looking for me? A familiar voice suddenly came from behind, startling me so much I almost stumbled. Turning around, I saw Shanbai standing there. His white robes were as pristine as snow, and the golden mark on his forehead gleamed softly in the sunlight. I was just here to pick herbs. I lied instinctively, only to realize I had forgotten to bring my basket. He chuckled lightly. "Picking herbs?" Without a basket. My cheeks flushed, but I felt a strange sense of joy. At least he was willing to talk to me. "Why are you here?" I asked, trying to change the subject. "This forest is my territory," he replied as he slowly walked toward me. "I've been watching you these past few days." My heart skipped a beat. "Watching me?" He nodded. I was curious as to why a human girl kept venturing into demon territory day after day. Gathering my courage, I looked straight into his eyes. "Because I wanted to see you." The words slipped out before I could stop myself, and I was startled by my own admission. But since I had already said it, I might as well go all the way. "That night you saved me. I haven't even properly thanked you." "This forest is my territory," he replied as he slowly walked toward me. "I've been watching you these past few days." My heart skipped a beat. "Watching me?" He nodded. I was curious as to why a human girl kept venturing into demon territory day after day. Gathering my courage, I looked straight into his eyes. "Because I wanted to see you." The words slipped out before I could stop myself, and I was startled by my own admission. But since I had already said it, I might as well go all the way. "That night you saved me. I haven't even properly thanked you." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, but it quickly faded back into calmness. Humans and demons are inherently different. You shouldn't come too close. But you saved me, I persisted. If demons are really as dangerous as the legends say, why did you help me? He was silent for a moment. Maybe it was just a whim. Of course, I teased. Who wouldn't be scared by someone as cold and distant as you? For the first time, a faint smile curved his lips as he flicked my forehead. You've got quite the sharp tongue. For an entire month, our meetings continued like this. I gradually realized I had grown attached to the forest and to our time together. But at the same time, a question began to loom larger in my mind. Xianbai, I finally asked him one day, how long do demons live? His expression froze instantly. Don't ask that. I want to know. After a long silence, he finally spoke in a low voice. The shortest lifespan of a dragon is 800 years. That number hit me like a hammer. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. So his voice was soft but filled with finality. Don't try to step into my world, Qing. It would be too cruel for you. After that day, he disappeared for a long time. And I, standing at the edge of the forest, stared at the herbs he had taught me to recognize, my heart filled with frustration. Could the distance between demons and humans truly be so impossible to cross? After that conversation about lifespan, I started noticing strange changes in my body. At first, it was just small things. Cuts from thorns while picking herbs would scab over almost instantly. At night, I began having bizarre dreams, with dragons soaring through clouds, and occasionally, I saw things that others couldn't, like faint auras around herbs. I thought these were good signs, proof that I was slowly getting closer to his world. But then came that day. I found it! I exclaimed excitedly, clutching the 1,000-year ginseng I had finally discovered. I wanted to show it to Xianbai. But after just a few steps, a wave of dizziness overwhelmed me. Careful. He caught me just in time, his long fingers resting on my wrist. I felt his body stiffen slightly. You have a fever, his voice deepened with concern. Do I? I instinctively touched my forehead. Ifilfina. Though recently, I've been feeling hot and cold, but we can't see each other anymore, he said abruptly. I froze. Why? Is it because of what we talked about? About lifespans? Actually, No, he cut me off, his voice colder than usual. Demons and humans should never have gotten involved in the first place. I was careless during this time. But, have you been having nightmares lately? He suddenly asked. I was taken aback. The dreams had been vivid. Sometimes the thrill of soaring through the skies, other times the bone-chilling cold of falling into icy caverns. I often woke drenched in cold sweat. And have you been feeling hot and cold? Healing faster than usual? Seeing things that others can't, he continued. I nodded, a glimmer of hope rising in my heart. Does that mean I'm getting closer to the demon clan? No, his voice turned sharp. It means you're being consumed by demonic power. If this continues, you will die. Those words were like a bucket of ice water, dousing all my hopes. That's why we can't see each other anymore. He turned away from me, not sparing a single glance. Go back and rest. In time, these symptoms will fade. You should focus on being human. Wait. I blurted out. At least tell me during this time, did you ever, even for a moment, care for me? But before I could finish, he transformed into a streak of white light and disappeared into the forest. After that, the entire forest changed. It was as if all the spiritual energy had been drained, and the once vibrant herbs began to wither. I tried, like before, to find traces of him, but the forest had become nothing more than an ordinary grove. At night, those strange dreams still came, but now they weren't the exhilarating freedom of flight, but the terror of falling into an endless abyss. I began to understand what he meant by being consumed by demonic power. It was as if something was slowly devouring me, leaving me neither fully human nor demon. My mother had once said, humans and demons walk different paths. It's best to stop before things go too far. But she didn't know, some things, once touched, can never be let go. Like the dragon scale I had secretly kept, dropped carelessly by him one day. In the moonlight, it shimmered with a faint silver glow. I knew this was likely the only trace he had left behind. The changes in my body gradually faded, but my heart grew more and more restless. I would rather continue being consumed by demonic power than lose even the chance to be near him. If humans and demons truly belong to different worlds, then why can't there be a way for humans to become demons and demons to become human? Once again, I woke from that recurring nightmare of falling into a deep abyss. Outside, the moonlight streamed through the window, softly illuminating the dragon scale I had secretly hidden away. Beneath the moonlight, the scale still glimmered faintly with a silvery sheen, but it no longer had the same vitality it once held. Just like the forest, once brimming with life, now lay desolate since his departure, Everything had lost its vibrancy. I gently stroked the dragon scale, feeling its cool, slightly chilling touch under my fingertips. This might be the only trace of him left. But I can't give up like this. If I can't reach him as a human, then maybe I should try another path. Suddenly, the dragon scale in my hand heated up slightly, startling me awake. Without realizing it, I had fallen asleep in the study again. The desk was strewn with ancient texts I had gathered, with my mother's handwritten notes resting on top. One page in particular caught my attention. To transform into a demon, one must endure 3 trials. First, one must acquire a demon core to temper the body. Second, one must survive the baptism of heavenly lightning. Third, one must undergo a rebirth through bloodline transformation. The process is perilous, with only 1 in 10,000 surviving. Even those who succeed must pay a price beyond human endurance. This was the extent of what I had found about the demon clan. The faded pages seemed to hold the answers I was desperately seeking. Footsteps echoed outside as a maid approached. "Miss, Master is asking for you." I rubbed my aching temples. "Tell father I'm feeling unwell." This was the 3rd time this month I had refused an arranged marriage. Ever since mother passed away, father had been intent on finding me a good match. But now, my heart was fixated on someone I shouldn't even be thinking about. It had been 2 months. Xianbai hadn't shown up at all. The traces he left in the forest were slowly disappearing. Without his magic, even the herbs had begun to wither. Yet, I still visited that place, not for any other reason but to meticulously study the medicinal plants, using the book of herbs he had once taught me from. "Miss, do you recognize this?" An elderly voice interrupted my thoughts. I looked up to see a bent old woman holding a medicinal plant. "This is jade bonegrass," I said, recalling the moment when Xianbai taught me about it. "It can treat bruises and fractures, but it must be used while fresh." The old woman's face lit up with surprise. "Wonderful. My husband fell from the mountain a few days ago, and none of the doctors we've seen could help him. I heard there's a miracle healer here who knows how to use rare herbs, so I came looking." "A miracle healer?" I was taken aback. "There's no such healer here." "How could that be?" the old woman insisted. "Everyone in the village knows about her, a young girl who learned medical skills from demons and cures illnesses the doctors can't." My heart skipped a beat. Over the past few weeks, I had indeed used Xuanbai's remedies to save a few critically ill patients, but I didn't expect it to spread like this. "Please, young lady, save my husband." The old woman suddenly dropped to her knees. "Please don't." I hurriedly helped her up. "Oh, take a look." The old woman's home was a thatched cottage on the edge of the village. Her husband lay in bed, his face pale and his groans unceasing. Upon examination, I found that aside from his injuries from the fall, his wound had become severely infected. I took out the medicine pouch I always carried and began treating the wound with the herbs Xianbai had taught me about. Just then, I heard a commotion outside. "There she is. That demon girl." A sharp voice shouted. A group of people stormed into the cottage. Leading them was Madame Wang from the neighboring village, whose grandson I had cured of a serious illness just days ago. "What's going on?" I asked. "Don't play innocent." Madame Wang pointed at me, furious. "Ever since you cured my grandson, he's been dreaming of a white dragon every night. Today, he developed a high fever and started shivering all over. It must be your demon magic that's harming him." I was about to explain when more voices erupted from outside. "My child too. He says a dragon teaches him to sing in his dreams. And mine." Only then did I realize what had happened. All the children I had healed, Xuanbai's magic must have lingered in the remedies I used. Though the medicines had indeed cured them, they must have unknowingly absorbed some of his demon energy. "Seize her!" someone shouted, and the mob surged toward me. "Stop!" The old woman stood in front of me. "This young lady came to save my husband. You don't know how dangerous she is." Madame Wang screamed. "She's in league with the demons, using magic to harm our children." As the situation grew more chaotic, I noticed a few of the children I had saved. They stood in the crowd, looking at me with a mix of fear and confusion, the same look the villagers gave Xianbai when they saw him for the first time. Thud! A rock struck my forehead, and warm blood trickled down my face. At that moment, the sky suddenly darkened, and a streak of silver light flashed across the heavens. "It's him." Xianbai must have sensed I was in danger, but nothing happened. The sky remained overcast, and only a light rain began to fall. He wasn't coming. Of course, he had told me we could never meet again. In that instant, I finally understood. The boundary between humans and demons wasn't just about the difference in lifespans, it was an unbridgeable divide between 2 worlds. I had tried to do good as a human, but all I brought was fear and misunderstanding. I wanted to cross that boundary, but now I realized how impossible it truly was. I fled the village, bruised and battered, and returned home. Staring at my reflection in the copper mirror, I saw the scab on my forehead, but the wound in my heart only deepened. That night, I made up my mind. If I couldn't be with him as a human, then I would change myself. I packed a few simple belongings and left home under the cover of night. Before leaving, I left a note for my father, telling him I was going to stay with my maternal grandparents for a while. My destination, according to my mother's notes, was the Siayun Monastery at the foot of the Western Mountains. By the third evening, I finally arrived at the monastery. The gates were closed, but faint chanting could be heard from within. "Devout visitors, if you wish to offer incense, please return tomorrow," came an elderly voice from inside. I'm here to find someone." I took a deep breath. I found an old journal that says the nuns here know about the demon clan. The chanting stopped abruptly. Moments later, the gate creaked open. An elderly nun with white hair stood behind it, scrutinizing me with sharp eyes. "Show me the journal." I quickly presented my mother's notes. The nun flipped through the pages, a complicated expression flickering in her eyes. "You're Mingyue's daughter?" I was stunned. "You knew my mother? Do you know why your mother left behind these journals?" the nun suddenly asked. I shook my head. 20 years ago, your mother came here seeking the same method to transform into a demon. The nun's voice was hoarse. At the time, she was already pregnant with you. I was stunned. She had fallen in love with a member of the demon race and wanted to transform so she could stay with him. But when she found out she was carrying you, she gave up. The nun sighed. She said that since she chose to become a mother, she should live as a human. My hands began to tremble uncontrollably. So, that was why my mother always warned me to stay away from demons. So, the nun fixed her gaze on me. "Do you still want to walk this path?" I lifted my head. "I'm not like my mother. I have nothing holding me back anymore." "Are you sure?" "What about your father?" "Primebit malasialip." Father always wanted me to marry into a good family, to live an ordinary life. But I can't do that. I'd rather become a demon, even if it means only watching him from afar, then knowing he's right there but never being able to get close. The nun finished my sentence for me. I nodded, tears unknowingly rolling down my face. The nun was silent for a long time before she spoke again. "If that's the case, I can teach you. But remember, this process may cost you your life." "I understand. The first step, as you've read in the journals, is to use a demon core to temper your body," the nun said, taking out a small bottle from her sleeve. "This is a demon core that has already lost its spiritual power. You can use it to practice first." I took the bottle. Inside was a crystal-clear bead, though it lacked any aura. "Every night at midnight, hold the core in your mouth. You must endure the agony of cold poison invading your body for 49 days, the nun said. "If you can survive that, I'll teach you the next step." That very night, I began my attempt. The moment the demon core entered my mouth, a bone-chilling cold rushed straight to the top of my head. I felt like I had fallen into an ice pit, with every inch of my skin cracking from the frost. I bit my lip hard, refusing to cry out in pain. "Most people can only last a quarter of an hour the first time," the nun said from beside me. But I forced myself to endure for 2 quarters. By the time I took the core out, it was covered in blood. "Continue tomorrow." I wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth. And so it went, day after day. Every night at midnight, I endured that bone-piercing cold. Gradually, I found I could last longer and longer. By the 30th day, I could hold the core in my mouth for a full hour. "Your body is indeed unique," the nun observed. "Perhaps it's because you've been exposed to demon energy before." I knew what she meant. Xuanbai's demon power, though it had harmed me, had also unintentionally altered my body. On the 49th night, I held the demon core in my mouth for 2 full hours. When I took it out, I noticed it had begun to emit a faint glow. "Interesting," the nun inspected the core. "Not only have you withstood the cold poison, but you've also revived some power in this dormant demon core." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means you do indeed have the talent to become a demon," the nun said. "But the real test is only just beginning. The cold poison was only the basics. Next, you'll face 81 days of torment." She retrieved a black box from a cabinet. "Inside is a real demon core. Your mother left it for you, saying if a fated person came for it in the future, I should give it to them." I opened the box, and an overwhelming surge of spiritual energy hit me. The core inside glowed with a deep blue light, with a golden pattern running through its center, just like the golden mark on Xuanbai's forehead. "This is a dragon's demon core?" I asked, my voice trembling. The nun nodded. "It was left to your mother by an old dragon acquaintance. Now it belongs to you." I stared at the demon core, my heart filled with complicated emotions. "Mother, did you already know that one day I too would walk this path?" "Keep it safe," the nun instructed. "When your body fully recovers, we'll begin the true trial." I carefully tucked the demon core close to my body and looked out the window at the moon. Xianbai, where are you now? Will there come a day when I too can soar through the clouds like you? The first time the Dragon Clan's demon core touched my skin, I almost cried out. Unlike the cold sensation before, this time, it was a searing heat, as if it was trying to burn the flesh off my bones. The Taoist priestess wasn't wrong. This was the true test. Each time you use the demon core, don't exceed the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, the Taoist priestess warned. If you feel the power becoming uncontrollable, stop immediately. But on the first day, I couldn't even last half that time. The power of the demon core was too overwhelming. I felt like my blood was boiling, and my bones were melting. If you can't endure, don't force it. The priestess handed me a bowl of medicine. The power of the demon core is too domineering. No ordinary person could possibly. I grabbed the core again and pressed it to my chest. The priestess sighed. You're just like your mother, stubborn once you've made up your mind. Why did my mother give up in the end? I gritted my teeth and asked. Because she understood what it meant to make sacrifices, the priestess replied. She said, loving someone doesn't necessarily mean being together. Protecting each other's true selves might be even more important. I didn't respond. I silently endured the pain that the demon core inflicted. Mother, I'm sorry. Your daughter can't be as free-spirited as you were. 1 day passed, 2 days, then a month. I started noticing changes in my body. My night vision improved. I could hear distant sounds, and even my sense of smell became more acute. But all these changes came with intense pain. Every time I used the demon core, I felt like I was falling apart. But whenever I thought of Xianbai, I clenched my teeth and pressed on. This pain was nothing compared to the agony of not being able to be near him. On the 49th day, for the first time, I saw a golden glint flash in my eyes. It was the Dragon Clan's unique eye color. Your progress is too fast, the priestess said with concern. Your body might not be able to handle it. I'm fine, I said, but suddenly coughed up blood. The blood was golden. The priestess's face turned pale. Stop. Your blood is already transforming. If you stop now, there's still time. But if you continue, I won't stop. I wiped the corner of my mouth. Unless he tells me himself that he never cared. At that moment, the sky suddenly darkened, clouds gathering overhead. A powerful demonic energy was approaching from the distance. It's the Dragon Clan, the priestess said. They've sensed the presence of the demon core. My heart raced. Could it be him? But it wasn't. A man in blue robes descended into the courtyard, his gaze stern. Who is using a Dragon Clan's demon core? It belonged to my mother. I stepped forward. The man in blue gave me a glance. So you're Mingyue's daughter. He sighed. What happened 20 years ago is partly our fault too. But you cannot continue. Why not? Because that demon core belongs to Xianbai. I froze. 20 years ago, he gave one of his demon cores to your mother, so she could safely pass through the transformation into a demon. But your mother chose to give it up in the end, the man in blue said. Now, Xianbai is also close to. Close to what? I asked anxiously. He's seeking a way to become human. His words hit me like a bolt of lightning. My mind buzzed, and I couldn't tell if it was the demon core's side effects or the shock of this revelation. Why would he? Why? The man in blue sneered. Isn't it obvious? For you, of course. That fool is willing to give up the power of the Dragon Clan just to become a fragile human. My hands started trembling uncontrollably. So we were both. Do you understand now? The man in blue said. You want to become a demon, and he wants to become human. In the end, aren't you both just going to miss each other again? I looked down at the demon core in my hand. That golden mark. It was his. No wonder the power always felt so familiar whenever I used it. I want to see him. No, the man in blue refused bluntly. He is in the final stages of his transformation. Any disturbance now could. Before he could finish speaking, a massive wave of demonic energy surged from afar. The man in blue's expression changed drastically. Damn it! Before he could explain, I had already sensed that familiar aura. It was Xianbai, but his aura was erratic, as if it could collapse at any moment. He can't hold on much longer, the man in blue said. The process of becoming human is too forced. His dragon core is about to shatter. Without hesitation, I ran in the direction of the aura. Behind me, the priestess shouted, Take the demon core. Only the purest dragon demon core can save him. I clenched the core tightly in my hand. Xianbai, wait for me. This time, it's my turn to save you. I sprinted as fast as I could, the dragon's demonic core burning hotter against my chest, as if it would scorch through my clothes. The closer I got, the more clearly I felt a familiar yet weakened presence. It was Xuanbai's aura, but far more fragile than before. After breaking through a dense forest, the view ahead suddenly opened up. I finally saw him. Xianbai knelt at the center of a massive magic formation, surrounded by a strange glow. His once pure white hair was turning the black of a human's, and silver dragon scales were shedding from his body, falling to the ground in pieces. The golden mark on his forehead was fading, bit by bit. Xianbai. I rushed forward, but the power of the formation threw me back. He slowly raised his head, his once calm and cold eyes now bloodshot. Qing'e, why are you? Before he could finish his sentence, he coughed violently, spitting out golden blood. Stop. Stop now. I slammed against the barrier of the formation again, ignoring the pain of being thrown back. You're going to die. It's okay. He forced a weak smile. As long as I can become human, as long as I can. I don't want you to become human. I screamed in despair. I want you alive. I want you to stay as you are. He froze. At that moment, the light from the formation suddenly intensified. Xianbai groaned in agony as more of his dragon scales peeled away. I knew his dragon core was on the verge of shattering. Qing'e stepped back. At some point, the Taoist nun had arrived. He's already at the final stage. Interrupting him now will. Before she could finish, I had already pulled out the demonic core. The core, which carried his aura, was throbbing wildly in my hand. This is your core, isn't it? I clutched it tightly. 20 years ago, you gave it to my mother, so she could survive her transformation into a demon. But she chose to give it up to live as a normal human. He nodded weakly. But I'm different. I raised the core high. I don't want to become a demon, and I don't want you to become human. I just want you to live as your true self. With all my strength, I hurled the demonic core into the formation. No. Xianbai cried out. But it was too late. The moment the core hit the formation, a blinding light erupted. I heard Xuanbai's roar, the true voice of the dragon. In the midst of the light, I saw a vision of a giant silver dragon emerging across the sky. In the next instant, the entire formation shattered with a thunderous crash. The shockwave sent me flying. By the time I struggled to my feet, Xianbai had returned to his previous form. His hair was once again snow white, and the golden mark on his forehead had reappeared. The only difference was that he looked far weaker than before. Why? He looked at me, his eyes filled with a vulnerability I had never seen before. Why did you stop me? Step by step, I walked towards him. Because I finally understand. Changing who you are isn't the way to love. But my demonic power will hurt you. Our lifespans. His voice trembled. I threw myself into his arms. So what? Even if we can only live for 100 years, even if it hurts every time we're close, I want to try. It's better than both of us turning into people we don't recognize. He was silent for a long time before he wrapped his trembling arms around me. Fool. His voice was choked with emotion. They say demons have no feelings, but I've lost to a mere human. In the distance, the man in blue and the Taoist nun exchanged a glance. Perhaps, the nun whispered softly, this is the best ending. The man in blue nodded. Yes, but that demonic core is shattered, and their problems still aren't solved. Who said they haven't? The nun smiled mysteriously. The core may be broken, but its power has already found a new master. That girl now carries a trace of dragon aura inside her. You mean, sometimes you don't need to change completely. A little bit of balance is enough. Careful, Xianbai supported my swaying body. Has the demonic power been flaring up more often lately? I nodded. Half a month had passed since the day the demonic core shattered. Although a trace of dragon aura remained within me, the power was fragmented, sometimes strong, sometimes weak, often leaving me feeling unwell. I should have just let you turn me into a human back then, he said, his voice filled with concern. Don't talk nonsense, I glared at him. If you had turned into a human, you would. Before I could finish, another wave of dizziness struck me. This time it was worse than before. I felt as though I was being torn in two, half of me wanting to stay in this world, the other half yearning to follow the dragon aura and soar into the sky. This can't go on, the Taoist nun frowned. Her internal powers are too unstable. If they can't be properly balanced, I fear. Is there a solution? Xianbai asked anxiously. The Taoist nun glanced at me and then at Xianbai. Perhaps you should seek out the other object Mingyue left behind. My mother left something else? A mirror, the nun explained. Before she left, she said that if you ever walk down this path, you should find that mirror. It's in an ancient temple on a cliff. The ancient temple on the cliff? Xuanbai's eyes flickered with a strange emotion. That's where I first met Mingyue. I was stunned. My mother had never mentioned this to me. Let's go. Xianbai looked at me tenderly. I'll take you there. He transformed into his true form, a magnificent silver-white dragon. This was the first time I had seen his real body, and it was even more beautiful than I had imagined. Under the moonlight, His scales shimmered like pearls. Are you afraid? He lowered his head and asked cautiously. I touched his dragon scales. You look much better like this than in human form. He let out a soft chuckle and bent down for me to climb on. Hold on tight. The next moment, we soared into the clouds. So this is what it feels like to fly. No wonder my mother's diary mentioned that her fondest memories were those moments among the clouds. The ancient temple was perched on a cliff, long abandoned. Xianbai told me that it used to be a sanctuary for human demon lovers. For reasons unknown, it had gradually fallen into ruin. Your mother met that person here, Xianbai said. That person? A young master from the Phoenix clan, he sighed. He was also an old friend of mine. Suddenly, I understood. So, the reason you gave my mother the demonic core? It was his dying request, Xianbai said. He wanted Mingyue to safely leave with you. But your mother chose, as a mother, to leave you a human path to follow. In front of a decaying Buddha statue, I found the mirror. Its surface was covered in dust, but I could still feel a strange power emanating from it. After wiping it clean, a line of words appeared in the mirror. To seek balance between human and demon, yin and yang must harmonize. At midnight, gaze at the moon and let your spirits resonate. This is my mother's handwriting, I exclaimed in surprise. Xianbai examined it closely. I see. This is an ancient method, a technique to balance human and demon forces. No wonder Mingyue left this behind. What does it mean? At midnight, when the moon is brightest, I will use my dragon power to guide you through the technique. This will allow you to maintain your human form while stabilizing the demonic power inside you, he explained. But the process will take a long time, and what? And we'll need to meet often, he said, slightly embarrassed. Otherwise, the balance will be disrupted. I couldn't help but laugh. So you're saying we'll be spending a lot of time together from now on? He turned his head, his ears turning a little red. It's unavoidable. Fine, I teased. But that means you're responsible now. I've always wanted to be responsible, he muttered softly. And so we began a new routine. Every midnight, Xianbai would come find me. We would walk through the woods or soar through the clouds together. He taught me how to practice the technique, using his dragon power to help stabilize the forces inside me. Gradually, the tearing pain subsided. I could maintain my human form while enduring the effects of the demonic power. Though my lifespan still wouldn't match his, I could live up to 300 years. That's enough, I leaned against him, gazing at the moon. Having more time with you is all I need. He held me tighter. Silly girl, even if we only had one day together, I would cherish it. The Taoist nun was right. Sometimes you don't need to change completely. A little bit of balance is enough. 3 years later. Miss, the mist is rising on the mountain again, my maid said with a cheerful smile. I put down the medical book in my hand and looked out the window. The mist swirled gently, glowing silver under the moonlight. This was a signal of Xuanbai's arrival. Ever since we found the method to balance our powers, we've been living like this. By day, I treat patients among the human race. By night, we meet within the mist. My father had gradually come to accept this arrangement. After all, my daughter was never quite ordinary, he would often say with a tone of indulgent affection. Stepping into the mist, I found Xianbai already waiting for me. He still wore his signature white robe, and the golden mark on his forehead shimmered under the moonlight. Why are you here so early today? I asked curiously. I'm taking you somewhere, he replied, taking my hand. With a swirl of the world around us, we arrived in a secluded valley. The air was filled with spiritual energy, and rare medicinal herbs covered the ground. What was most remarkable was that these herbs seemed to possess both the medicinal properties of the human race and the spiritual energy of the demon race. This is a secret realm I found, he said. The herbs here are suitable for both humans and demons. I looked at him in delight. You mean? Yes. I want to open a clinic with you here, he said somewhat shyly. Let it be a place where humans and demons can coexist. I carefully surveyed the surroundings. The valley was surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, with water on one side. It was the perfect spot to build a few houses. The location was hidden, but not too remote. It's a great idea, I said with a smile. But wouldn't it be beneath the young master of the dragon clan to become a doctor? What's so demeaning about it? He huffed lightly. Besides, I've already told my clan. This area will be under my management from now on. Warmth filled my heart. He was trying to find a legitimate reason for us to be together openly. Soon, several wooden houses were built in the valley. We named the place Cloud Mist Manor, and it became known for treating difficult and complex cases. Gradually, more and more patients arrived, including demons. Interestingly, many of the patients were human-demon couples, just like us. Who knew there were so many like us in this world? I said one night as we sat on the roof, gazing at the stars.
Xuanbai held me close.
That's why your mother left that mirror in the ancient temple, not only to teach us the technique, but also to show us that there's always a way. I nodded. Over the years, I had come to understand my mother's intentions. Though she chose to give up, she had been paving the way for me all along. She knew that one day I would walk this path too. Life passed peacefully like this. I would still experience flare-ups of demonic energy, and he would sometimes suppress his dragon aura for my sake. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was that we were together. One winter, a particularly special couple arrived at the valley. The woman was an ordinary human, and the man was a fox demon. "We heard that there's a lady doctor here who can harmonize the powers of humans and demons," the woman said timidly. She was pregnant, but her child, imbued with demonic energy, was unstable. Looking at her, I was reminded of my mother. "Don't worry," I said, holding her hand. "The child will be fine. We specialize in this kind of treatment." Xianbai nodded in agreement. "I'll help stabilize the demonic energy when the time comes." The woman looked at us gratefully. You two are so kind." After they left, Xianbai suddenly said, "Actually, we could also." "Could what?" I asked, pretending not to understand. "We could." He stammered for once, his ears turning red. I leaned into him with a smile. "All right, but you have to promise me one thing." "What is it?" "When we have a child, let them choose for themselves whether they want to be human or demon." He paused, then smiled tenderly. "All right." Night fell, and the mist rose in the valley. In the distance, we could hear the laughter of patients and the faint aroma of medicinal herbs wafting from the furnace. This place had become a small paradise, where humans and demons who didn't fit into the world could find solace. Our story continued, but it was no longer bound by the lines of identity. We had learned that true companionship was never about physical form but about the connection of the heart. In this world, there are both the stubbornness of fire and water and the beauty of harmony between yin and yang. We simply chose the latter. "Qing'er, tell me, have you been well these past years?" I looked at my father, and warmth filled my heart. After learning my mother's story, I finally understood how hard it had been for him all these years. Though he was just an ordinary doctor, he had silently protected our family's secret. "Father, you knew from the beginning that I was special, didn't you?" He gently stroked my hair. "You were different from the moment you were born. Most children wail when they come into the world, but you were quiet, just staring at everyone with your golden eyes. So that's why. I was born with a trace of demonic aura, the bloodline left by Liuhua. It was why I could later withstand the power of the dragon clan. Your mother told me before she passed that you would walk an unusual path one day," he said, gazing out at the mist beyond the window. "At first, I was terrified, afraid that you'd suffer the same fate as her. But seeing you now, I'm at peace. Indeed, my current state was unusual. I could see things that ordinary people couldn't, and my lifespan far exceeded that of humans. Yet I remained human in form, without true demonic powers. The Taoist priest once told me that I was a unique being, with both the bloodline of the Phoenix clan and the aura of the Dragon clan, but essentially still human. This balance is perfect," Xianbai always said. "You are who you are. You don't need to define yourself as either human or a demon." Father stayed for a few days before leaving. As he said goodbye, he held Xuanbai's hand and said, "Take good care of Qing'er." Xianbai blushed and replied, "I will do my best." Watching my father's departing figure, I felt a sense of happiness. Despite the differences in identity in this world, hearts could still connect. My father, though an ordinary man, had embraced so many extraordinary things. My mother, though she had chosen to give up, had left me hope. And I, walking between the human and demon realms, had found my own place of belonging. That night, I gently touched my slightly swollen belly and curiously asked, "If it's a girl, have you thought of a name yet?" Xianbai thought for a moment. "How about Yuanyu, Full Moon?" I laughed. "Why?" "Because her story will be even more complete than her grandmother's." Leaning into his arms, I gazed out at the moonlight. Yes, this generation's story was already complete enough. As for the next, I would leave it to them to write their own legends.
Extra story, The Incomplete Full Moon. My name is Mingyu. This name was given to me by my father, who said that on the night I was born, the moon was perfectly full. But I have always felt that this name does not suit me at all. A full moon symbolizes completeness, yet my life has always been destined to be incomplete. Everything started on that fateful night. When I was 18, I got lost while gathering herbs and stumbled upon an ancient temple on a cliff. There, I met a man with a handsome face who introduced himself as Lu Hua. At first, I thought he was just a wandering nobleman. It wasn't until one night when I saw his true form under the moonlight, a divine phoenix with feathers of fiery red. In that moment, I should have been afraid. But for some reason, as I watched him soar in the moonlit sky, a strange flutter stirred within me. Are you scared? He landed gently in front of me and asked cautiously. I shook my head. It's beautiful. He was stunned for a moment, then flashed a brilliant smile. Mingyu, you truly are different from the others. And so, our secret meetings began. I had never met anyone like him, no, I should say, like this demon. He was witty, knowledgeable, and curious about everything in the world. Human medicine is truly fascinating, he would often say, even without demon power, it can still save lives. I taught him about medicinal herbs, and in return, he shared with me the mystical remedies of the demon clans. Slowly, we developed some medicines that both humans and demons could use. This is the best way, he said. Humans and demons should live in harmony. We opened a small clinic within the ancient temple, dedicated to treating human-demon couples who were rejected by the world. Though life was humble, those days were the happiest of my life. Then, one winter, I discovered I was pregnant. That's wonderful. Lu Hua was ecstatic. Our child will surely be extraordinary. But a sense of unease crept into my heart. Could it be dangerous? Don't worry, he reassured me. I know a friend, the young lord of the dragon clan. He's a skilled healer, he can help us. That friend was Xianbai. Indeed, his medical skills were superb, and he stabilized the chaotic energy within me. But his expression grew increasingly grim. The situation isn't good, Xianbai finally admitted one day. The demon power inside the baby is too strong, and Mingyu's body can barely handle it. Unless she also transforms into a demon. Lu Hua immediately offered to help me transform into a demon. But I knew that once I took that path, there would be no turning back. What should I do? Should I give up my humanity for love? Or should I sacrifice my love for the sake of the child within me? Silly woman, Lu Hua held me tightly. Don't overthink it. We'll find a way together. But fate played its cruel hand. While I was still hesitating, chaos erupted in the demon world. Some incited hatred against human-demon unions, even going so far as to hunt down such couples. To protect a pair of fleeing lovers, Lu Hua was caught in a vicious battle. That night, he came to see me, his body covered in wounds. Mingyu, promise me, he handed me a bronze mirror, live well, and take care of our child. No, you'll be fine. I cried. Don't cry, he gently wiped away my tears. Though our time together was short, it meant more than 1,000 years to me. In the end, Xianbai arrived. He brought a dragon clan's demon pearl, saying it could save Lu Hua's life. But Lu Hua insisted that Xianbai give the pearl to me instead. Protect her and the child, were his final words. That night, I watched him turn into a trail of firelight, dissolving into the moonlit sky. Xianbai kept his promise, using the power of the demon pearl to protect me and our child. But in the end, I chose not to become a demon. Partly because I didn't want my daughter to be burdened from birth, and partly because I wanted to remember this past with a human heart. Before leaving, I hid the bronze mirror in the ancient temple and recorded my cultivation techniques on it. I knew that one day, my daughter would walk this same path. But I hoped she could do so more perfectly than I did. I named her Qing'er. Qing means clarity, which also signifies enlightenment. I wished for her to see her true nature and not be confined by worldly matters. Now, watching her and Xianbai together, my past regrets have turned into comfort. I've realized that true completeness in this world doesn't require both people to change entirely. Sometimes, holding on to your true self allows for a more beautiful story to unfold. Lu Hua, did you see this? Our daughter, she has found her own completeness.